All right. Hello, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to the webinar here on SBA franchise changes in the franchise registry. I'm going to talk about a lot of different things today, but want to welcome everybody that attended the most recent session in Wisconsin and those folks that got the chance to see Edith in person. Really appreciate all the attendance at our session and all the great positive feedback that we've gotten on that. Of course, we are subject matter experts when it comes to franchising, so it's our business to know everything related to the franchise model. It's a unique form of small business franchising, so we're going to continue to be a resource for you guys here, as we always have been. I do recognize a couple names in our attendee list on the side, so it's good to see some of you that I've worked with before in the past. If you have any questions or comments throughout the presentation, my co-presenter, Nancy Chen, is kind of riding with us here. She'll be available and be collating any of the questions that you have. You can type them into the chat box, and at the end of the presentation, we'll be answering those. We'll also be sending out those questions that we've collected today and others that we've had from other sessions to everyone who attends. And we're also recording the webinar. So if you missed anything, don't worry, we can send you a copy after the session. Let's go ahead and jump right in. I want to talk a little bit what we're going to do today. We're going to address the uncertainties and risks that the new SOP has created. Now, as you may know, the new SOP has simplified some things, but it's also created some uncertainties and has shifted some risk onto you as a lender. So we're going to show you what those are. We're going to show you how the franchise registry is going to make the process simple for you and how we're going to mitigate some of these new risks and help you get your deals closed as we have in the past. So for the next hour, we're going to address what changed in January of 2017 with respect to the SBA SOP and franchise lending. We're going to talk about more recent changes and amendments to that original notice that came out in February of this year in 2017. We're going to look at some lender reactions to the changes and also some franchisor reactions so you can see both sides of what lenders are going through and what some of the brands that are out there are dealing with as well. I thought it would be useful to start by taking a look at sort of a timeline of the SBA franchise SOP and take a look at kind of where we've been, where we are, maybe where we're going in terms of what the SBA is requiring with respect to this kind of broad concept of SBA franchise eligibility. And we'll unpack that for you here in the next couple slides. For those of you that remember the franchise review process prior to the financial crisis, the SBA only looked at a handful of issues that were focused on what the SBA calls affiliation, right? And this is having to do with the contract relationship between your borrower, the franchisee, and the franchisor, and more specifically, making sure that the language in the franchise agreement allowed your borrower to operate and exist as a small business person. And that, of course, was the intention of the SBA program. That these franchise brands didn't have too much control over your borrowers, so that they really weren't small business people, they were just agents of a larger company. At that time, the SBA and most of the addendums that they created focused on the transfer issue almost exclusively. Now, if some of you folks have been doing this for a while, you might be familiar with what the transfer issue is. And that's basically a line or a few lines in the agreement that would attest and say that the franchisor would not unreasonably withhold their right to transfer or sell the business, so that your borrower could decide to sell the business whenever they wanted to and could easily get out if they needed to. So that was the major issue that SBA was looking at prior to the financial crisis. But after the financial crisis, the SBA experienced a lot of losses in their portfolio, and they looked back at some of the causes, and at that time they started expanding their reviews of affiliation of franchise agreements, started expanding what transfer issues. We're looking at a lot of different issues. We're looking at how's the money being controlled, hiring and firing of employees. A lot of different things came into the fore then. In addition, the SBA expanded their reviews to include other documents. So outside of the franchise agreement, they were also reviewing other exhibits. That might have included a guarantee or right of first refusal documents, numbers, anything that was included in the franchise disclosure document in addition to the franchise agreement. And that was in 2011. So 2011, they expanded their reviews to all the other documents, and out of that evolved the franchise registry that you were used to in previous years, where you would come on the registry site, you were used to getting a certificate of franchise documents and an addendum. You would check off and select those agreements in the certificate that the borrower signed that pertain to your deal and so on. Now, this, as you can imagine, caused a lot of issues for some brands. There was a lot of work being done on SBA's part in reviewing these agreements, so they decided they were going to boil everything down to a standard addendum. So in January 2017, the SBA released a new SOP and a one-size-fits-all addendum for franchise brands, and that was Addendum Form 2462, and some of you may have used that already this year. So basically what they did is they boiled down that question of affiliation that we just unpacked, right, that started as exclusively the transfer issue, then expanded to other issues, this question of affiliation. They now boiled it down to a standard 4-point addendum, which we'll take a look at here in a bit. But there were some issues with that addendum. Franchisors had spent a lot of time creating past addendums with the SBA. Other brands had specific language in that addendum, their own customized addendum that was not present in the standard addendum created by SBA. So there was a lot of pushback with this. And in February 2017, the SBA issued an amendment allowing franchise brands the option to choose to either use the standard addendum Form 2462 or a previously approved addendum from either 2015 or 2016, along with a certification document. And we're going to look at all this stuff, just kind of giving you an overview there. So that's what happened in February 2017. They expanded their option for franchisors, but it really created some more questions, as well as it solved some problems. We've heard from a lot of lenders saying, well, okay, we have the documents available for 2015, 2016, but what's going to happen in the future? What happens in 2018? Haven't really given a lot of guidance on that. Because the SBA has simplified their SOP in this way, in a lot of ways they're going back to the pre-recession days in terms of what they're responsible for and what they're shifting on to you as a lender. So that's kind of where we are today with the SBA SOP. I want to unpack it a little bit more with respect to the differences in the SBA 5010-5H versus the active SOP today, 5010-5I. What's happening in the past with the franchise registry and SBA doing individual reviews of all the franchise agreements is that in doing this large review process for affiliation, they were also looking at all the other SBA issues, right? Business eligibility, size issues, discrimination issues, all these other SBA issues were included in this review. So there was kind of a thing that happened with lenders where this term eligibility, which is the larger question of is this brand eligible, and the smaller question within eligibility of affiliation kind of were used interchangeably, right? The reviews that were being done by SBA, lenders said, oh, well, they're eligible because they were reviewed by the SBA. Well, the SBA was doing review largely for affiliation and looking at all these other SBA issues along the way. That's one of the major changes that's happened today. We're going to unpack all these. The first thing that SBA did for you in the past that they did not do previously was to determine whether or not the brand is a franchise according to their SBA definition. In the past, the SBA had a very broad definition of what constituted a franchise, quote unquote, meaning not necessarily a franchise brand, but whether or not the concept that your borrower had needed to be reviewed for affiliation. The SBA had a standard that said that if there was a product, service, or trademark that was critical to the borrower's business operation, then the borrower's agreements would have to be reviewed for affiliation, and the addendum may or may not have been needed. In the new SOP, the SBA is saying, lender, you make the determination by looking at the agreements and determining whether or not the brand's business is a franchise according to the FTC guidelines of a franchise, right? The Federal Trade Commission. And those guidelines are set forth in the Federal Trade Commission franchise rule, and that's something that, again, we will show you a little bit later on the webinar. So that was the first major thing, to say, like, okay, is it a franchise? Do we have to apply the addendum? SBA was telling us that in the past, and now it's up to us to determine, does this brand meet the Federal Trade Commission guidelines? Now, for those of you that understand what those guidelines are, a lot of the times it's cut and dry. The borrower will sign a franchise agreement and will use the franchise disclosure document for the disclosures of the brand. So for most of the brands, it's cut and dry whether or not it's an FTC franchise. But there are a lot of concepts you're going to deal with that fall into these non-franchise relationships. They have license agreements, dealer agreements, jobber agreements. And it's not always as clear as it is when you just have an FDD sitting there in front of you. So we were setting up, and we have set up the franchise registry to help you address those issues. We'll be looking at that. The next issue is determination on business eligibility, right? And that was the larger umbrella we talked about. With under the umbrella of eligibility, there's this question of affiliation, right? And then there's all these other eligibility issues. An example that I give a lot on my webinars is a brand called Curves Fitness, which some of you may be familiar with. It's a fitness franchise that's marketed towards women. For an SBA deal to a Curves franchisee, the borrower has to sign an affidavit that states that their building plan has changing rooms for both men and women. So that's an example of another document that was needed to prove eligibility, but didn't have anything to do with affiliation in terms of the franchise agreement. Right? So in 2016 and previous, the SBA was handling all aspects of eligibility while doing their larger reviews of affiliation. This year, they're saying, hey, here's a one-size-fits-all addendum to answer the affiliation question, right? But we're still leaving it up to you, the lender, to determine eligibility for those other SBA issues. Now, when weighed against the amount of time and effort and issues that were present in the question of affiliation, there's a lot fewer issues under this kind of umbrella of other SBA issues. Things that we talked about with Curves, other things like that. But that's still a major issue for lenders. I've talked to a lot of lenders individually that are struggling with this, and this is one of the reasons why the franchise registry is still needed by lenders and is still used every day. I know that when the original SOP update came out in 2017 in January, it kind of felt like the registry was either going away or was no longer being used or was not necessary. But really what you'll see as we go through the presentation is that the registry is actually more needed than it ever has been for one of these, for issues like this. So again, to wrap that up, SBA took care of all eligibility. Under the umbrella of eligibility, there was affiliation and these other SBA issues. In doing their reviews for affiliation and determining whether a brand was eligible, they took care of all those other issues. Now they're presenting you with a standard addendum to handle the affiliation question, which is great, which is a faster process, but it still leaves lenders now the responsibility of making the larger determination of eligibility and making sure that there aren't any other SBA issues. And the third major thing that they did for you was to negotiate solutions for these issues with other documents with franchise brands. Right? Now, the lender has to identify issues and negotiate solutions one-off with a franchise or, of course, rely on the franchise registry and the membership and relationships we've had with the brands to be able to negotiate these issues. For example, if the franchisor has a right of first refusal as a supporting document to their franchise agreement, the standard addendum may not cover that. If there's language in that right of first refusal that says that this right of first refusal, the language in this document supersedes all other documents, all other franchise agreements, and you may have an eligibility issue there, and there may require another document or something on the side to be able to clarify that either that document will not supersede the franchise agreement or to somehow extend the protections of the addendum across to that right of first refusal. That's just an example of something that you have to look for. But all this stuff is being tracked on the registry and is going to be available for you for all the brands that have memberships with us. So it's still very important for the brands to come on the registry. There are a lot of brands that are out there saying, well, oh, we got this SOP notice that said that the franchise registry is not needed and it's just a standard addendum. Well, they don't realize that it's just for one part of eligibility, that there are other issues that are out there that lenders are looking for. All right, we're going to continue with our charts. We're going to take a look. I want to just take a quick overview of the new process as we see it and what lenders should be going through when they get wind of a franchise concept, of a possible deal for a brand. And then we're going to go through all these individually, and we'll come back to this slide at the end. But just to run through, those of you that have done franchise deals in the past and have used the registry are probably used to saying, okay, we've got a franchise deal in-house. Let's find out the year of the agreement. Let's go to the franchise registry, and we go to the SBA section, and we have some things that we did there in our process. We're still going to be coming to the registry. We're still going to be searching for brands. We're still going to be going to the SBA section. But we've changed the SBA section this year to address the issues that you're looking for. So the first thing you want to do when you hear from a franchise is get on the registry and look for the franchisor's contact information. There's always going to be info on the registry for an SBA contact, an underwriting contact, and a franchise sales contact. So the SBA contact is the person that is responsible for signing your addendums and getting you everything you need for closing. We never recommend that you hand an addendum document or something to the borrower to be handed on to the franchisor, because who knows who they're dealing with. Maybe they're dealing with a development person or somebody that's not aware of what they're willing to sign for SBA deals. The SBA contact is a designated person. It could be an attorney. Sometimes it's the chief operating officer, someone at the brand to help you, so always use that. The underwriting contact is available for questions that you might have along the underwriting process. So maybe you're opened up to FDD and open and close units looks a little weird, or you've got a projection from a borrower and it looks like it's a little bit out of whack. That's the person who's available to answer questions there. And then franchise sales and financing, if you've done some deals to a brand and you wanted to talk to them about doing some more expanded lending or a transfer financing or remodeling program, something like that, that's what you reach out to in franchise financing. So franchisor contact information, obviously super important. Check that out. Next thing, check on the registry. Is the brand a franchise according to the FTC definition? Now, again, most of them are going to be, but you want to check if it's a license agreement or a dealer agreement. If they're a member on the registry, if they have an active membership, we're going to tell you right away, is it an FTC franchise? So, okay, check. Now, if it doesn't meet the SBA standard, if it doesn't meet the FTC definition of a franchise, then the brand does not need an addendum based on the way the SOPs are written today. And that's where it's a little bit kind of tricky, where maybe you might have used an addendum. And in fact, there's a brand now, Allstate, which is a brand that was always on the franchise registry, always had agreements approved and addendums, but the way the new SOP is written, they don't meet the FTC definition of a franchise. So they actually do not need to use the addendums in the past where they had to before. So that's an example of that. Check for FTC franchise. Then, once we know it's a franchise and we need to apply the standard, we're going to tell you what their preference is, right? We talked about how in January 2017, the SBA issued a standard addendum, and then later in February, they gave the franchisors the option to use a previously approved document if they had it. So that's what we're going to tell you. We've talked to the brands. We've indicated that. So if they're going to use the standard addendum, we'll tell you, we'll give it to you. If not, we'll provide you with the addendum that they prefer, whether it's 15 or 16, and we're also going to give you the certification form, 2463, from SBA to get that completed. So get the documents that you need there. Then the next thing you look at is the franchise's business model eligible based on their model and other issues. So we're going to look at that. And then we're also going to look at those other SBA requirements that might be present, such as Curbs Fitness had their no bathrooms and changing rooms affidavit, and different things like that. So we're going to put all that out for you if that stuff's present. If there's any other addendums or affidavits that need to be signed, that will be served to you as well. So that's the process. We're going to unpack this one by one and take a look. Before we do that, I just wanted a quick note on some of the other things to look for on the franchise registry, and kind of a note on kind of prudent lending practices and best practices. The basics of this is that we want to make sure that we're collecting all the information that's available, right? We want to make sure that we don't miss anything. And one of the great things about the franchise registry is making available to you as lenders the most recent franchise disclosure document, the FDD, that a brand has with us. So most of them are going to be, well, now it's 2017. A lot of brands will file their yearly documents, their FDDs, around this time, April, May, June. So you'll be getting fresh information. You'll be getting fresh financial information, unit account information, all this great stuff. So I like to reference on the webinars the OIG report on Banco Popular's loans to Huntington Learning Center. This is one that a lot of lenders know about, and just basically talks about how the lender disregarded relevant and available data that was there. Just took borrowers' business plans for rote, didn't really check up on what was happening, and really didn't look at information that was right there in the public disclosures to say, like, this information that the borrower was giving us wasn't correct. And in fact, there's a line in the SBA SOP on page 151 that says that when the application involves a franchise, the lender agreement and all related documents, including the franchise disclosure document and any other credit information provided, such as the number of failed loans or anything else like that. So the FDD is one of the things that's available for free on the franchise registry. Another one of the reports available is called a bank credit report. And we're not going to go into too much about those today, but they're there for you. And if it's just as simple as jumping on the registry and grabbing a franchise disclosure document and putting it in your file, you've at least looked at open and closed units, profit and loss information even for their franchise unit. So if you look at in an FDD in the item 19, you'll have P&L information a lot of times for franchise units, for company-owned units. You might even have a breakdown of expenses in the first 18 months, things that can really help you price your loan and maybe even tell you, well, maybe the borrower's projections here aren't, in line with what the rest of the system's doing. Either we have to justify this or we have to go back and get some clarification. So just basically collect all the information that you can. We're going to talk a little bit more as we go through about, I'll mention some of the underwriting tools and stuff as we go along. And then I also want to touch back again on that procedural notice and just clarify what happened with the update. When the SOP was released in January, the standard addendum was Form 2462, and that was the only form used. And then in February, they gave the option to use the standard or the previously approved addendum from 15 or 16 with a new form that they came up with, which is an SBA certification, and that's Form 2463. And I just mentioned this here because a lot of the lenders I've dealt with in the past are used to coming on the registry and getting a certificate and an addendum. So they're used to this model of certificate and addendum, and that's how I know that our brand is eligible. Well, with the standard addendum, Form 2462, there's no certification document required. So I've had some lenders that have asked me for a certificate of franchise documents to go with the standard addendum. It's not used. The only time you're going to use a certification is when you're using a previously approved document, and it's not even the same document. It's not called a certificate of franchise documents. It's called an SBA certification of franchise review. So in fact, the certificate of franchise documents has been discontinued entirely. So you don't want to have that as part of any of your processes. You don't want to be looking for that. You will need that certification, though, as I said, if the brand's going to use their previously approved addendum. But we're going to have all that on the registry for you. We're going to be making all that available and very easy to read, so you won't be missing anything. SBA also modified the standard addendum form. These are just some of the changes. I'm not going to read through all these. They modified the standard addendum to be able to fit with non-franchise concepts. So they added some drop-down functionality and the ability to use licensors and dealer agreements, things like that. And also clarified some issues having to do with restrictive covenants and temporary personnel franchises. Was also part of the update in February. I thought it would be helpful just to take a peek at what the franchise brands are feeling about this. And not surprisingly, some are positive, some are negative. A lot of them are uncertain. We actually call out to these franchise brands to, of course, get their determination on what they're going to do with the standard addendum, but also just to kind of see what they're feeling. A lot of them didn't really know about what was going on, hadn't reviewed it. So lots of different feedback. Some of the positive feedback we've gotten is from franchisors, you can imagine. Reduction in rules sounds like a good idea for everyone. No more need to wait for franchise affiliation reviews from SBA. So that's seen as a positive. Some of the concerns that they've had and some unresolved questions were some of the exemptions that had been passed in the case with these cases. And also kind of how does this change SBA's stance on brands that had been previously ineligible? 7-Eleven, for example, had a lot of SBA issues, but now if 7-Eleven is willing to sign the standard addendum, are they now eligible? SBA hasn't really given a lot of clarification on those types of things. These are in the slide deck here for you, just some of the sample responses, what the franchisors are concerned about. The main thing, and we've listed some of the results here for you, the main concerns that I've heard from franchise brands is just about how much time and money they put into this process, right? They've spent all the time negotiating separate addendums that fit their brand with the SBA. Now the SBA has just gone and slapped the standard addendum that everyone has to sign. And there are some other franchise brands that actually incorporated SBA concerns and language into their franchise agreement, right? So think about this. 2014, let's just say you go and you have a franchise brand, you negotiate an addendum for your franchise with SBA, and they say, we don't like this language, we don't like that language, we'd like it to say this, and so you have to use this addendum. So then you think, okay, well, you know what, next year, we're just going to take that addendum, we're going to modify the language and just change the franchise agreement, now it's going to be eligible. We won't even need a review. Well, there are brands that did that, and now, because of this new requirement for a standard addendum, they still have to go and sign a standard addendum, even though they've negotiated these issues previously. So you can see where some of the frustration comes on the part of franchisors that have done SBA stuff in the past. All right, moving on to the registry. Big question, will the franchise registry be going away? Of course, the question, or the answer to that question is no. The language in the update in January kind of made it seem like the registry was being discontinued, that it wasn't going to be used anymore, that the SBA was somehow shutting it down. The registry has actually always been a privately owned site. It's always been owned by FRANdata. We're separate from the SBA. So it's not going to be going away. Everything that you've come to rely on the registry, the underwriting information, all the credit risk analysis, everything's still going to be there, and even all of the older decisions on SBA are still going to be there. We're going to take a look at that too here in a bit, but all the older decisions, so I don't think you have to go online and download a bunch of addendums. All the previous addendums are there for as long as we've done eligibility review, so all that stuff's going to be preserved. And in truth, we all don't really know where this is all going to end up. So we feel it's really valuable to be able to preserve that history of SBA eligibility and really decisions by the SBA for our lenders and our franchisors as well. All right, we're going to dive in to the SBA section on the franchise registry. What you're looking at right now might look familiar to you. This is the general tab on the registry. So whenever you do a search for a franchise brand and we find that brand for you, we deposit you on this general tab for the brand. There's some basic information that's there about the concept, and all that contact information we talked about is also there, the franchise financing, franchise sales, and the SBA contact. That's made available to you as well. And what we circled there on the right, top right, is the tab for SBA. So we're on the general tab. You see underwriting, unit geography, SBA. So we're going to be focusing almost exclusively on the SBA tab. But all that information that I talked to you about before, the franchise disclosure documents, bank credit reports if they're available, requesting fund reports, which is a for-pay report on the registry, that's all in the underwriting section. So if you want to get an FDD for a brand, search them, pop over to underwriting, boom, download the FDD, and you've at least gone a little bit of the way towards doing some good underwriting and prudent lending practices. So remember that. But we're going to focus on the SBA tab. SBA contacts, for those of you who use the registry, you're used to this. You search the brand, you click on SBA, and it pops you over to the SBA section. But if you're used to using this, you might notice that it looks a lot different. And that's because, like we discussed before, we've changed the SBA section to reflect and address the new challenges that lenders have for this year. All right, looks like we had a little audio issue. If anyone's having audio issues, let me know, and we can get them fixed up for you. All right, so when we move over to the SBA section, the first question, of course, that we're asking is this business a franchise according to the FTC definition? We want to define that, because if it's not a franchise and not an FTC franchise, then we don't need to do any of this affiliation stuff. Now, we talked about the three-point definition of what it says in the FTC franchise rule. Again, I'm not going to read that, but it's there for you. The slides are there. We can send this to you. This is the standard that we review against and what is in the FTC franchise rule. And it lets us know what it means to be a franchise by their definition and whether or not we're going to apply this new SBA standard. So in the case of Arby's, we are an FTC franchise. The next thing we look at is affiliation. All right, what's the brand's stance with respect to this affiliation? Will they sign the new addendum? Do they want to sign a previously approved document, or are they not signing anything? We don't have too many more of those brands now that are just full stop on the new process. We've worked with a lot of them. I think Dunkin' Donuts was one of them, and we worked through them. worked with them in the SBA to kind of facilitate this new option. But most of them are either going to say yes, meaning yes, they will sign the standard addendum 2462, or they're going to say use a 2015 or 2016 addendum. In that case, you'll look below, and whatever they're going to use is right there. So you get the SBA approved addendum, and you also get the franchisor certification, form 2462. So what you need to do is collect those, boom, boom, and make sure you send them off to the SBA contact for signature, much like you did in the past. Next thing we're going to look at is business eligibility. Business eligibility is another SBA issue, and we look at those bullet points there, A through M. We'll determine, based on a review of the franchise agreement, that the franchise brand does not offend any of those issues there with respect to SBA. Then we'll also look below for other SBA requirements. Those are those other requirements that we talked about along the lines of Curse Fitness, whether those are other affidavits that need to be done on the side. Like we said, there's the affidavit for bathrooms and changing rooms. Any of that stuff's going to be in other SBA requirements. And the other thing we're going to have in other SBA requirements for you is an assessment of the franchisor's stance with regard to the other SBA requirements. Now, these are other requirements. This is language, what they call special provisions for franchises, which are in the SBA SOP, which talk about the lender's right to be notified if the franchisor terminates your borrower, having access to franchisor's books and records with respect to the borrower's business operations, the lender's ability and option to cure default on behalf of the borrower, and then there's another one that's escaping me right now, but there's 4 of them there. And this is language that is recommended by SBA, but it's not required. Some of you lenders out there will use them with some deals and not others based on the strength of the borrower, stuff like that. So some of this stuff franchisors will absolutely not agree to. Some brands are okay with it all. Some brands have one of the 4 provisions they will never do. So what we've been doing this year is making sure that that info is clearly displayed to lenders. So if there's something that the franchisor absolutely full stop will not sign and agree to, we're going to have that under other SBA requirements, and we're just going to tell you, okay, franchisor will not agree to, give access to books and records. So that way you're not coming forth with an agreement late in the process and finding out that the franchisor absolutely will not sign it, and then you have issues like that. So that's something that we added this year. It's something that I've heard a lot from lenders. It doesn't happen a lot, but that'll be there. So that's everything that's under other SBA requirements. Now you'll see below that there's also the access to historical review. So we talked about how all the agreements from the past are being preserved and are available to you. That's where they are under historical review. So if you're doing a repair or you're looking at a file or something from the past, you wanted to know what was approved in 2010. Was this even eligible then or something? That's there. But you don't need to ever grab a document from the historical review section to process the deal you're doing today. It's purely for your reference. It's there if you need it, and you can access it anytime. All right, so now we're going to come around again to this chart with the process. We talked through it before, but we'll talk through it again here now that we've looked at everything on the SBA section. And this just, again, kind of mirrors the 4 sections that we just looked at on SBA. First, you're hearing about a brand, get on the registry, search them, check for contact information, get that info, make sure what's going on. Then next, let's look down and see, is the brand a franchise according to the FTC definition? Yes or no? If it's a no, we have nothing else to do with respect to affiliation. We don't have to sign the standard addendum. It's not going to be required. If it is an FTC definition, okay, next step. What does the franchisor prefer to do? Do they want to sign addendum form 2462? Or do they want to use a previously approved document with a certification, form 2463? And we didn't actually talk about what that certification says. It's very similar to a certificate of no change or non-material change, if any folks remember that document, which is before the certificate of franchise documents. Basically what it says, and it makes the franchisor attest to, is that the language in the borrower's agreement, which they call the current agreement, but really means the agreement that the borrower signed, has not changed against the language that was amended and was created an addendum for in the previous document. So it says, okay, we have an approved document from 2015 with an addendum, and the borrower's current agreement is this document, and the franchisor is going to test that the language that the SBA reviewed and amended did not change between the 2 documents. And that's what basically what Form 2463, the certification form, says. It's important to note that, though, because I've had some questions from lenders saying, like, okay, we have a 2015, 2016 document. Does that mean I can only use it with a 2015 or a 2016 franchise agreement? No, you can use it with any agreement year as long as the franchisor can certify that the no change provision is true. So as long as the franchisor can sign that Form 2463 and have that be correct, then you can use a 2010. You can use whatever you want if you're doing a refinancing or working capital deal or anything like that. You can still use the older ones with the new addendums with the 2015 or the 2016. Just has to have the franchisor be able to sign that. So just pay attention to that. Make sure they understand what that's saying and they just don't, bloop and sign it and not pay attention to that. And then once we've looked at the franchisor affiliation preference, standard addendum, or previously approved, then we want to scroll down further on the registry and look at business eligibility and other SBA requirements. All right, is the franchise business eligible based on their business model and the other issues that we looked at? So that's the basic process there. Hopefully we've explained that well. Going to go through and take a look at some of the other little features and things that I want to make everyone aware of on the site, things that'll make your life a little bit easier. We get a lot of questions. I know we get a lot of questions about franchise brands. When this new document coming out? Are they updated? All this different stuff. So to make sure that you guys are informed as soon as possible about franchise brands that you regularly finance or have targeted to finance, we've created a portfolio tool that allows you to track these brands. So very simply, at the top of those pages, you'll see, or the home page for the brand, you'll see a button that says Plus Portfolio. And that allows you to put all franchise brands that you're searching for into a centralized portfolio that allows you to track basic information and also be notified on a regular basis of changes. So once you add your brand to a portfolio, you'll be able to come to this page, your portfolio page, and very quickly assess what the status is of the brand. Do they have a BCR on file? You can quickly download the FDDs, so you can get the most recent document there, and also quickly view the SBA documentation. Some of the other stuff we're showing here on the site, total units in franchising, fund scores, that's enhanced information that we have for subscribers to the franchise registry. So all the lenders that are on the call, every single lender in the universe, as we know it, has access to the registry under a free subscription. You can sign up with your bank, we get your free access. But all of these other tools and metrics and fund scores and all this great stuff, outside of course, the FDD and all the stuff we talked about today, is a subscription-based model that we can have a talk with you about offline. If some of the stuff that you see in the next couple of slides that kind of pique your interest, let us know and we can talk to you about how to get access to some of that great stuff. Notifications, though, are part of your portfolio. So the point of the portfolio, of course, is to stay updated on the information. So you can set notifications, and of course, we don't want to overwhelm you with info. So you can set how often you'd like to have these notifications and which aspects of a franchise information is important to you. So do you just want to know about SBA information and the most recent FDD? You can set that and be notified weekly, be notified monthly. If you're someone that's working in the underwriting credit department and you're using our bank credit report or the fund report product and you want to make sure that you get the most recent info when it comes out, you can get notifications for new fund reports. We usually update those when we get the new FDDs in. So, you get an update for a new FDD and then we'll crunch some numbers and do some work and we'll get an updated report for you. Really important, really super easy to use. Make your life a little bit easier. Of course, you can always email me if you have questions or Nancy. But most of the time, Nancy is just going to forward you on to me. But we're happy to hear from you, of course. The other thing we have that's really exciting is an ability to search for franchise brands based on certain criteria and metrics. So you're used to the regular search button on the franchise registry. Right below it, there's an advanced search button, and that allows you to do a search on the free level by a lot of different things. You can do a search by minimum years in franchising. You can say, okay, give me brands that have been franchising for 20 years, have a minimum of 50 units domestically, and are SBA approved. And we can return you a list of brands just based on those very general criteria. Of course, you see there's a section with a lock next to it. That is for subscribers, and they have access to a ton of different search metrics, from fund scores to continuity rates, growth rates, locations by state. We're going to look at, in the next slide, some state metrics and breakdowns that you have available to you that are really helpful. This is a really powerful tool that we're continuing to build out and we have available for lenders. The other thing that I just mentioned that we're really excited about is state-by-state unit data. And we were able to build that out on the franchise registry in the unit geography tab. So now you can really get a great sense of how's a brand performing, not just nationally with a larger success rate, but you can actually dig down into states and maybe into your individual regions and understand, well, okay, like how's the brand performing in my region? Just got off a call an hour ago, and we're talking about Firehouse subs, and the lenders we were talking to were based in Pennsylvania, but the bank had lenders all over the place, and they had a large presence in Florida. Now, when you look at the state data, if you go in and you look at Firehouse subs, the success rate in Florida is like 98%. So they're on the call with these lenders, and they're getting amazing reviews. The Firehouse subs loans are performing incredibly well. But when we looked at the state performance data for Firehouse subs in Pennsylvania, we saw it had an 80% success rate. And it was just a case of it being a different market, right? But you had lenders in the same bank, one in one section of the country having one great experience with the franchise brand, and lenders in a completely different side of the country in the same bank having a poor experience, and in fact decided not to do a couple deals and avoided some things when they were really getting guidance from the other bank saying this is a great brand. So that's a way that maybe some larger banks can kind of drill down into their own lending area and understand where a brand might be performing better or worse, and really use the tools at your disposal in terms of the rate of the loan, the amount of money the borrower is bringing to the table, building extra working capital into the deal, using those tools and pulling those levers that you have at your disposal to kind of account for this information that we're able to give you on the state-by-state data. All right, a little bit of a coming soon that I wanted to talk to everyone about. We are in the process of building out some functionality around rating franchise brands. And this is more about kind of bringing best practices to the fore, understanding between lenders like what are good practices that we've had, things that maybe some pitfalls we have with some brands. Not so much about what's a good brand and who, what had a great process in closing and what other brand maybe didn't go so well. Although there's some of that we're encouraging with that. More about getting these best practices out there. And it's funny that we go to these conferences and we interact with lenders, but we don't really get a chance to share best practices and understand our experiences and try to improve them outside of maybe a couple times a year that we get together at these regional conferences and such. So that's kind of the effort where it's going and the meaning behind this and why we're trying to promote this. You'll see this coming. This is not live yet. When you see this kind of stuff pop up, feel free to go in there. Now you can, when this comes live, you'll be able to rate anonymously or under your name. With the institution. And again, we're not trying to talk down franchisors here or point people out as being bad actors. The purpose of it is really to elevate best practices along the industry and making sure we're sharing all the information that we can with each other. That's the purpose of the Rate the Brand. All right, also wanted to give a quick update on the FRUNS number, which many of you know, the Franchise Unique Identification Number. So the FRUNS number is the backbone of our database of franchises. We've been, at FranData, we've been tracking franchises for over 20 years. Now, the SBA has recently changed their process by which they identify franchise loans in the E-Trans system and in SBA 1. And for those of you on the call that have been having issues with the new SBA code system and have had any trouble with processing deals, I'll let you know that you're not alone. I've talked to many, many lenders over the past couple of weeks. Seems to be an issue kind of brewing right now with being able to process the deals through E-Tran. I'm working on with the SBA and other lenders to try to get this resolved. So if you're in that boat, you can email me and I can get you connected with all the folks that we've been working with to make sure that we share info on that. Basically, the FRUNS numbering system is a system that uniquely tracks franchise brands. The SBA used it for many years to identify loans to franchises in their system and had incorporated it into the E-Trans system. We just want everyone to know that we have continued to use the FRUNS numbering system. That's never going away. We collect and catalog over 250 new brands every single year. And there are other banks, there are many banks out there that use our FRUNS numbering system to track loans to their portfolio. And do a lot of different things with that. FRUNS numbering system is not going away. It's still going to be available. We still have the emerging or the new concept report that we issue every month, which a lot of banks subscribe to, which talk about all the. I have a feeling that the SBA is probably going to be going back to that because from what I've been hearing, the new system is not going well, to say the least. But again, if you're in that boat, if you try to process deals with FRUNS, with the franchise code, and you're trying to get through SBA 1 or E-Tran, it's just not working, let me know. Send me an email, and we can get on the line, have a little group therapy session together, and hopefully. All right, we got a couple lender FAQs here, and these are all available on the slides, so you can have those after the call. The big question that I get a lot just from lenders are twofold. One, what the franchise registry's role in the process, and two, kind of where are we going from here, right? Are there going to be more changes? Are we going to get more updates? Where's the SBA landing on this? A lot of it came from after the new update when the SBA allowed those older agreements, the 2015 and the 2016 previously approved documents. Lenders start saying, okay, this is going to be good for a while, but what's going to be the guidance going forward? And it follows that as the franchise agreements get farther and farther away from the approved documents in 15 and 16, fewer and fewer franchisors are going to be able to sign that certification, Form 2463, and actually attest that there have been no changes, because there's going to be changes over time. So to answer kind of both of those in one, the franchise registry is still going to be here. We're still going to be an advocate for lenders. We're always an advocate for franchisors. And we're going to be in the middle of this process. You know, I get the calls all the time when lenders have issues with what's going on. So, you know, when a lender has a problem processing the FRUNS number, I get on the horn. I start calling people at SBA. I talk to other lenders that have had issues, you know, and we're working together to resolve all these problems together. So we're still going to be in the middle of that. We're still going to be helping you guys along. And in terms of where the SBA is going, you know, stay tuned. Keep in touch with us, hopping on our webinars every once in a while, logging onto the site and emailing us when you have issues. Our guess is really as good as everyone else's. The best we can do is keep our ears to the ground, make sure we're engaged with the SBA and lenders and franchisors, and coming to the registry and using that as part of your process makes you a part of that. So make sure you're always doing that. And that's everything that I wanted to present today. So if you guys have any questions, I haven't had any questions come in from Nancy. So either I'm talking super fast and no one had any time to type them, or we did a really great job and there aren't many questions. But if you do have any questions, type them in, email me. You can dial the 800 number there. My direct line isn't on this slide, but you can email me and get my contact information. I know I've worked with a bunch of you in the past. Any questions, anything that comes up, please let me know. We're here to help and make sure that franchise lending goes smoothly for you this year and in the future. All right, gonna hang out here. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and send them on over. All right, folks. Thanks everyone for attending, and have a great day.